G'day everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Michael, I am the Motor Barista, and today I'm riding none other than the 2020 Harley Davidson Road Glide Special, and I'm really excited to be out on this bike today. Now, if you've caught some of my recent videos, you know that I test rode the Street Glide Special and the Indian Chieftain. Both of those bikes are fork mounted fairings, meaning it's a traditional batwing fairing where the fairing moves with the handlebars. After riding that bike, a lot of you reached out in the comments and told me to jump on the Road Glide and experience what the frame mounted fairing is like on this motorcycle. And if you don't know what that means, is a frame mounted fairing allows for the handlebars to steer independently from the fairing itself, meaning that the fairing stays stationary and your handlebars are free to move. And this is a very similar design used in sport bikes and adventure bikes. And the claimed benefits of this, of course, are lighter feeling handling because you don't have that weight on the handlebars, and reduced feeling of wind on the handlebars. Those are some of the things I'm going to be looking for today when I'm riding this bike, as well, of course, just enjoying the bike in general, seeing how it performs, how it handles, what it's like just for daily riding. So I'm looking forward to giving this bike a ride and give you my thoughts. Big thanks to Kashira and the Perth Harley Davidson team for letting me take this out on an extended ride. I really appreciate it. This is a fully stock Road Glide Special. It's a 2020 model, which means it has the RDRS, that is the Reflexive Defensive Rider System. Now that system comes stock on all of the touring specials, which is something different compared to the American market. So it's 40 degrees Celsius out today, so I'm going to jump back on this bike and try and get some wind flow. I'm going to go for a cruise to the Perth Hills, see how this bike goes, and then we'll stop to give you some of my thoughts. Please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. The goal is 500 subscribers by the end of the year, so subscribe and help me reach that goal. All right, let's go, let's jump on the bike, let's get riding. Before we talk about performance, before we talk about handling, I want to talk about the design of the bike, because I think this is one of the most striking features of this motorcycle. Quite modern and very aggressive, and I think it really does strike people when they first see this motorcycle. And it's either a love or hate relationship with the design from what I've seen in the comments and from other people's opinions. I think the Road Glide is the ugly child of the family. Before you say anything, I actually think that's a good thing. When I first started seeing this motorcycle and looking into it and looking at photos and other test ride videos and seeing it in person, I really wasn't a fan. I thought it was just a little bit too weird and ugly looking. Didn't look quite, you know, as elegant as the other motorcycles, which is what was appealing to me. But the more that I've looked at this bike over the last few months, and the more that I've seen it in person, the more I've really started to like it. I think that's where that ugly child dilemma comes in. It kind of grows on you after a while, and some of its weird features and weird design quirks are actually what makes it really cool and really unique for its design. So, this bulky front end isn't for everyone, and it definitely wasn't for me when I first looked at it, but more and more I'm really liking it. And in person, I have to say, it does look a lot better. So if you haven't seen it in person, make sure you hold your judgment until you get down to a dealer and have a look at it, because the lines are really sharp and they're really clean, and it just gives it this kind of boxy, aggressive look, which I really like. Now, another important design feature, of course, is the fact that this fairing, like I said before, is mounted to the frame, which means, as you can see, my handlebars will turn independently from the fairing itself. Now, if you've never ridden a bike that has a frame-mounted fairing, this is going to look and feel quite weird, possibly for the first time. My advice would be, stop looking at your fairing and your handlebars when you're riding the motorcycle. Look ahead and trust that the motorcycle will go where your head is looking, and that your hands will follow suit. Don't worry about what's going on here. Don't pay attention to it. Now, because of this design, it does change the layout of the cockpit area. I think this is a point of contention for Harley riders. Do they like the Street Glide with its more classic Cadillac style with all the gauges on top, or here with the Road Glide, Harley's forced to move the gauges and move the speakers around to fit this frame mounted fairing, and it's a really tough thing to really handle. One thing, for example, that they've had to do is put the Boombox GTS infotainment system at the top of the fairing, and it's out of arm's reach. So if I'm riding and I want to change, there's no way I'm touching that screen unless I lean forward, as you can see. Obviously, you can just use your handlebar controls to control that infotainment system, which is what I've been doing, and that seems to work fine. And I mean, honestly, how much are you actually playing around with that as you're riding anyway? In terms of viewing that infotainment system, it's absolutely fine. It's in a really good eye level for me. However, if you are a little bit shorter, there's a slight angle on the screen itself, and you might have a little bit of glare in the sun depending on the angles of the light when you're riding. I think to sum up this kind of cockpit feeling in one word will just be big. Everything just feels bigger, everything feels further away, feels like you have a lot more space. The distance between my head and the top of this windshield here is a really long distance away, and it just gives this sense of more room. I know this could be a good thing for you. You might like that sensation of more room, especially if you're a taller rider, but at the same time, it can feel a little bit overwhelming. Or at least I could see it being overwhelming for particularly new riders or shorter riders. But I have to admit, once you are up and riding, everything does feel really nice, very ergonomical, and everything is easy to manage. As long as you're kind of controlling the infotainment system on your handlebars, you should absolutely be fine. So this is a touring bike after all, and we have the beautiful stretch saddlebags. There's lots of space in here. I've got one kind of satchel which I use as a camera bag, and I can easily fit my camera and tripod in that same saddlebag as well. So I can fit all of my camera gear and tripod that I use for filming these videos in just the one saddlebag. So that's really, really handy. It's nice and easy to use, one touch to open, nice and easy. It does take a barrel key to lock. You know, some people say that Harley needs to be moving over onto keyless locking systems for those bags, which I would have to agree with. I'm looking forward to seeing that come in future models. Now, one last thing I want to talk about in terms of design would be the color. And of course, this is going to vary from bike to bike, but in this particular model that I'm test riding, I felt like I had to mention the color. This is the brand new River Rock Gray. And now don't get that mixed up with the River Rock Gray denim. This is the actual, this is the metallic paint. It's got a flake in that paint as well, and it looks absolutely beautiful. It kind of has a more rich bronze tone to it, and that flake really lets it sparkle and come to life. I would say that this, without a doubt, is the most beautiful paint of the 2020 model lineup, in my opinion. If I was to get the Road Glide, and trust me, I would love to get a Road Glide, this is the color I would get it in. It is absolutely stunning. I'm hoping that it picks it up on camera. Otherwise, just pop into your local Harley dealer and make sure they've got a Road Glide in this River Rock Gray and have a look, because it is stunning. Last thing to touch on would be ergonomics. I'm 6 foot, and as you can see here, I've got a pretty comfortable riding position. Elbows are in slightly, and it's a very relaxed position. I could definitely go long distance in this riding position. I know a lot of people would prefer, you know, their bars to be up here, but for me personally, I don't like high bars. I like to have my bars at about chest height. And that's just because I find I can definitely control a lot better. Similar to like riding a motocross bike, that's just where I'm comfortable, and I feel like I can control the bike a lot more. They do have quite a big pullback, and there is a big angle on these, so your wrists are pointing out a little bit. Could be uncomfortable for some if you have bad wrists. I haven't had that problem yet on the test ride, but something to bear in mind. Now, my eye level is above the top of the windshield here. I could probably go a little bit taller on that windshield, and I haven't yet had any wind buffeting issues, but I still need to hit some higher speeds to really put that to the test. But hopefully here, as you can see me sitting on this motorcycle, this would be my riding position. Hopefully this gives you a good indication of that riding posture, but nothing can obviously replace sitting and riding on one yourself. it is hot. I should have bought a bottle of water. The bike handles as you expect the Harley Davidson touring bike to handle. The power plant, the Milwaukee 114, is obviously a fantastic engine. It's buttery smooth. And it's just a real joy to ride. The torque's always there, which is really nice. Now this bike is fully stock. I think that throwing on, exhaust system, air cleaner, tune, and ideally a stage 2, throw in a performance cam in there. I think with those, obviously this bike is going to turn into a whole new beast. And I think that's something to bear in mind with these bikes when we get them. They're so controlled by the EPA standards that they're so constricted out of the factory. They really can't breathe and they really just can't function the way that they're supposed to. But throwing on that stage 1 and then if you can that stage 2 really opens up this Milwaukee 8 engine in particular. It really brings to life the engine, I think, in the way that it was originally designed to perform. You're still going to have a lot of fun on this bike. In its stock form, no, you're not going to be winning any drag races, but again, this is not what this bike is made for. It's more, your long distance touring is one option, but also I see this bike functioning really well in like an everyday rider format. So, using it for commuting, throwing in all your work stuff in the saddlebags, maybe your gym gear, and then of course being able to take this out on the weekend and go the long distance. So this is what this bike is made for. The front brakes handle fantastic. One of my favorite things about the Harley Davidson touring line are those Brembo front brakes. They stop really well, they bite really nicely, and I really wish I had them on my Sport Glide, to be honest. They're really good performing brakes. The bike leans really nicely. I would say that at low speeds, you can definitely feel the lightness of the handlebars and turning that bike. As soon as you kind of shift your weight a little bit and lock that wheel and do a U-turn, it's really easy to manage this bike. As long as you've got good kind of brake, clutch, throttle management, it's really easy to kind of maneuver this bike in tight spaces. And that's something I really like. If I was to have a motorcycle like this, it wouldn't be a touring first motorcycle. It would be an everyday bike. I would need to get in and out of the city, maneuver tight car parks, and then of course take it out for long distance. Having that lightness on the front wheel, it definitely does show its strengths in those low speed maneuvers. Now that being said, on the Street Glide, I was also comfortable doing those slow speed maneuvers as well, even with all that weight on the handlebars. This is just something that you're going to have to kind of work out what's best for you. As soon as you kind of get up to speed though, like the Street Glide, the weight disappears completely and this bike is really smooth. Probably not going to be throwing this into 180 bends at high speeds in its stock form. A lot of people do that on these bikes, but they do have swapped out rear suspension at least. It depends on the rider, it's on the self. But what I can say for everyday riders, people who just are good, confident riders, but aren't racers, people who are just enjoying riding country roads, and this bike handles really nicely. I haven't had any issues with the suspension. I know everyone talks about how bad those rear shocks are. I have to be honest, I've been riding over train tracks today, and I've felt those train tracks under the wheels, but my suspension has handled it just fine and it's felt really nice. Riding on these country roads and riding with some speed, the bike feels really planted and it feels like it's on a really solid track. It doesn't feel like it's ever going to kind of slip out at any point, which probably brings me into my next thing, the RDRS system, the Reflex Defensive Driver System. Now I had that on the Street Glide that I rode, and now on this, it never has engaged once on those test rides, and that's doing U-turns in little gravel bends, that's running its pace through through these country roads. And the reason I mention that is it's not overbearing. You're not going to notice it, it's not going to get in your way, and the only time I can see it really kicking in is really kind of when you want it to kick in those situations that you don't plan for and something unexpected hits the road in front of you. Well, that's where I think this system is really going to come in handy. It's definitely a kind of a set and forget system. I don't think you're going to have any issues with it being overbearing, unless of course you're somebody who's trying to do burnouts and all that kind of thing, but that's not really my style. If you want to see more information on that defensive rider system, I recommend going over to Matt Laidlaw's channel, where he fully breaks down the system and he actually tries to push the bike into some of those emergency functions. I think that's a really good breakdown for the system itself. In terms of addressing the question of would I go the Road Glide Special or the Street Glide Special, well, it's a tough call, and I think I'm gonna have to make a whole video dedicated to that decision-making process. So if you want to find out which way I would go and which bike I prefer, then make sure you hit that subscribe button and help me reach 500 subscribers before 2020. Let me know what you think to the Road Glide special in the comments below, plus any questions that you have on the Harley Davidson touring lineup. As always, make sure to ride safe, drink some damn fine coffee, and I'll catch you on the next one.